The sun beat down so fierce the air itself seemed to shimmer. Heat wavered across the wagon trail. The earth cracked open like old scars. Each step kicked up dust that clung to skin, stuck in throats, and settled heavy in tired lungs. Mary dragged her little sister forward, her hand tight around Clara's wrist. Their dresses were torn, shoes near gone, lips split dry. The older girl's eyes burned with something that was more than fear. It was the sharp edge of desperation. The younger stumbled, whispered hoarse, "Mary, I can't." "Keep walking," Mary rasped, voice raw. "Just keep." Behind them, the land stretched wide and empty. Nothing but desert and silence, broken only by the whine of cicadas and the rasp of wind. No wagon wheels, no voices, no laughter like there once had been. Only the memory of gunfire echoing behind them, of smoke curling skyward as their wagon train burned. A sound came then. Hoofbeats. Slow, steady, carrying across the wasteland like a drum. Mary froze, pulling Clara close. Dust rose on the horizon, a single rider cutting through the shimmer of heat. The figure loomed larger with each step of the horse. Shadow stretched long in the dying light. The rider stopped before them. Horse snorted, leather creaked, and silence thickened. He sat tall in the saddle, wide-brimmed hat low, face half lost in shadow, coat draped like nightfall. No words, no greeting, only the weight of his eyes, dark and unreadable. Mary's lips trembled. Her arms went around her sister, pulling her close, and she whispered up toward him, her voice barely more than breath, "Take her instead of me." Her words seemed to hang in the heat, fragile as glass. The man did not answer. The desert wind carried nothing but stillness. His silence pressed harder than any words could have. He dismounted slow, boots crunching against the gravel road. His steps carried dust, his shadow falling over the two girls. He bent, lifted Clara into his arms, then looked down at Mary. She braced herself for the abandonment she had asked for, body trembling, eyes brimming with tears she refused to let fall. But the man did not leave her. His silence stayed. Strong arms reached, lifting her too, setting her on the saddle behind her sister. No words, no bargain. He simply mounted once more, gathered the reins, and rode on, both girls carried in the cradle of his silence. The trail stretched before them, endless and scorched. Behind, the air still carried the ghosts of gun smoke, but with each hoofbeat, the sound faded, swallowed by distance. Clara leaned against him, her eyes already closing. Mary did not rest. She watched the desert all around, her small hands gripping the saddle leather tight. The horse's hooves struck rhythm steady as a heartbeat. The man never spoke, not when the sun bled down the horizon, painting the desert in fire, not when coyotes sang their mournful cries from the canyons, not when night fell cold and black across the earth. Mary turned her face toward him once, eyes searching his silence. She found nothing, no smile, no scowl, just the steady presence of a man who had chosen them both. And the old voice, rough as wind through sagebrush, speaks across the years. Some folks say mercy don't need words to be heard. That day, silence spoke louder than thunder. And from then on, wherever that man rode, two children rode with him, carried not by chance but by choice. The desert remembers, and so do I. The windmill groaned against the wind, its old blades clattering like bones in the silence. The ranch lay stretched beneath a wide sky. Fences leaning, barn boards warped gray with sun, the smell of dust and dry grass hanging heavy. Mary carried a pail, nearly too heavy for her arms. Water sloshed against the rim, darkening the hem of her torn dress. Clara trailed behind her, balancing a bundle of firewood that threatened to spill from her grasp. Their small voices carried faint against the vast stillness. On the porch sat a rocking chair that moved though no one pushed it. The wood creaked once, then stilled again. The man stood by the corral, fixing a broken post. Hammer fell, steady, sharp against wood. He didn't look up as the girls passed, but his presence filled the yard like a wall against the emptiness. At dusk, the sky burned orange. Coyotes called from far off, their cries tumbling down the canyons. Smoke from the chimney curled upward, thin and lonely. The sisters huddled close to the hearth, faces lit by the weak fire, whispering about shadows that lingered at the edge of their dreams. The man sat in silence, chair drawn back from the firelight, hat brim low. His eyes glinted once in the glow, then vanished into shadow. Morning came hard with hooves. The girls pressed against the window, peering out as the man saddled his horse. The town lay beyond a rise, across 10 miles of dust and wind. He mounted without a word, rode off down the trail. Dust rose and settled in his wake. Ash Creek greeted him with silence first, then whispers. The main street was worn thin, planks creaking under his boots as he stepped down. A dog barked once and went quiet. Curtains shifted behind cloudy windows. The saloon doors swung slow, groaning on their hinges. Inside, voices stilled when he entered. Glass clinked once, then stopped. Men at the bar stared over their shoulders. One spat into a tin can, missing wide, eyes fixed. Another let his hand hover close to the butt of his revolver. He walked steady, spurs striking wood, the room thick with smoke and suspicion. He set coin on the counter, the only sound that dared move. The barkeep's hand shook as he filled the sack with flour, beans, coffee. His eyes flicked up once, then away. At the corner table, a man with a scar down his cheek leaned back slow, hat tipped. He watched with a smile that wasn't friendly, a tooth glinting gold in the lamplight. Thought ghosts didn't walk in daylight, he muttered low, but the silence carried it across the room. The man at the counter didn't answer. He gathered the sack, turned, and walked back through the swinging doors. Behind him, the saloon breathed again, whispers hissing like snakes, boots scraping, cards shuffling fast to cover fear. By nightfall, dust rose on the horizon. Not the dust of wind or wandering cattle, but the kind that comes from riders, too many to count. Mary spotted it first from the porch. She clutched Clara's arm, pointing, eyes wide. The man followed their gaze, his jaw still, his silence heavy. He led them inside, set the bolt across the door. His steps fell hollow on the wooden floor as he crossed to the mantel. For the first time, he touched the rifle hanging there. His fingers brushed the stock, lingered on the worn steel. The fire cracked. Shadows leapt across the walls, stretching tall, sharp as claws. Mary whispered, "They're coming back." Clara pressed her hands over her ears, shaking her head. The man turned once, his gaze steady, unflinching, then lowered the rifle back to its hooks. He sat again in his chair, silence pressing the room until it was hard to breathe. In town, rumors spread like fire on the wind. At the blacksmith's, at the saloon, along the dusty boardwalk, voices carried low. "They're after the girls. They say the wagon wasn't no random raid. Witnesses, that's all them children are. And witnesses don't live long." And always, the same name whispered, carried like a curse. Ghost of Black Mesa. Some spat when they said it. Others crossed themselves. A drunkard at the corner of the bar let it out loud, bold with whiskey. "That ain't no rancher. But there's the ghost, and I seen what he done. Men fall like wheat before the scythe when his irons sing." The barkeep hushed him quick, eyes darting to the corners, as if the very walls might hear. The scar man in the corner only grinned wider, teeth flashing like a blade in the dark. The storyteller's voice scratches low, carrying through the hush. And so it was that Ash Creek trembled when he rode its streets. Not for what he did that day, but for what they remembered he'd done before. They feared the silence more than gunfire, for silence meant the ghost still carried breath. And in that silence, shadows grew long over the land. The first shot cracked at sundown. A rider's silhouette toppled from the ridge, rifle slipping from his grasp, dust blooming around him. Mary and Clara clutched each other by the barn wall, eyes wide as shadows stretched across the yard. Beyond the fence line, figures shifted in the dusk, riders circling, waiting. Dust trailed their movements like smoke. The man stood on the porch, hat brim low, gaze steady on the horizon. In his hands rested the revolver he had not touched in years. The steel caught the last light of day, cold and sharp. The wind carried the faint jingle of spurs, the creak of saddles, the low murmur of men gathering in the canyons. Inside, lamps flickered weakly, their glow trembling against walls already scarred by time. The girls crouched near the fire, whispering prayers. The man entered, set the revolver on the table. His hands moved slow, deliberate, oiling, loading, the sound of cartridges sliding into chambers breaking the silence like small thunder. Mary's voice quavered. "You're not just a rancher." His eyes lifted to her once, shadowed by the lamplight. He said nothing, but the weight of truth filled the room. Clara pressed closer to her sister. "Who are you?" The chair groaned as he sat. He set the revolver down before him, barrel gleaming dark. His voice came then, rough, low, carrying years of dust and sorrow. "Cole Archer." The name hung heavy, the fire popping in the pause that followed. Mary frowned, confused. "What does that mean?" His eyes did not leave the flames. "Ghost of Black Mesa." The words seemed to make the walls tremble. Clara shrank back, but Mary only stared harder, waiting. His voice carried on, each word pulled from a grave he'd buried deep. "Once, men feared the sound of my guns, feared the silence that came after. I rode with death at my side and left no place unscarred." The firelight flickered across his face, a man carved in stone, sorrow etched in every line. Then fever took mine. His gaze dropped, voice breaking against the weight of memory. "Wife, son, all gone. And what good's a gunfighter when the world he's fighting for is buried?" The room held nothing but the crackle of wood, the steady beat of his grief. Mary whispered, "So you buried your guns?" He nodded once. Silence filled the gap his words left behind. Outside, coyotes howled, their cries twisting through the canyons. The riders' campfires flickered against the distant hills, sparks rising like stars torn loose. The girls pressed closer to the man, fear etched sharp on their faces. But in that fear was something else, a strange kind of trust, born not of words but of the silence he carried. By midnight, the ranch was ringed in firelight. Shadows of men moved along the ridges, rifles glinting when they caught the moon. Cole stepped outside, the cold air biting his lungs. He walked the fence line slow, boots crunching against dry earth, hands brushing along the wood. Here and there, he set traps, a wire pulled tight, a pit half hidden in the dark. Every motion was quiet, sure, like a man who had done this 1,000 times before. At the barn, the horse stamped nervously, sensing the danger thick in the night. Cole laid a hand on its neck, calm and steady, whispering words too soft to carry. Back inside, the girl sat huddled by the hearth, eyes heavy with sleeplessness. Cole set his revolver on the table once more, sat across from them, and watched the fire burn low. Mary's voice came small, but sharp. "You're going to fight them." His silence answered. Clara shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They'll kill you." Cole looked at her then, his eyes dark as the mesa shadows. He spoke with the certainty of stone. "They'll try." The fire died to embers. The night stretched long and heavy. Outside, the wind whispered through dry grass, carrying the smell of smoke and the promise of blood. The old storyteller's voice breaks through the silence, low and grave. And that night, children learned the truth of the man who took them in. He was no simple rancher, no quiet drifter. He was the ghost of Black Mesa, a name spoken in fear and fury across the land. But ghosts don't sleep easy, not when old blood calls for new. And the hills were waiting, listening for the sound of thunder that only his irons could bring. Dawn tore open with gunfire. Bullets split fence posts, wood bursting in sharp splinters. The barn door shuddered under lead, hay spilling in streams of dust. Horses screamed. Smoke from black powder rolled thick across the yard. Mary dragged Clara beneath the porch steps, arms tight around her sister, their breaths ragged and shallow. Above them, boots thudded steady. The man stepped into the storm. Cole Archer moved like stone come alive. His revolver spat fire and rhythm, each shot clean, deliberate. A rider toppled from the ridge. Another slumped sideways off his saddle, rifle clattering useless against the rocks. The outlaws circled wide, their shouts carried ragged on the wind. Dust swirled under their charge, the air thick with hooves and curses. Cole strode into the yard, calm amid chaos, smoke curling around him. His coat whipped in the wind, brim of his hat shadowing his eyes. One man rose from behind the water trough, shotgun aimed. Cole fired once. The blast dropped the outlaw flat, silence swallowing his cry. Another tried to flank from the barn, but a wire trap snapped his legs from under him, his scream cut short by Cole's second bullet. The girls pressed their faces into the dirt, trembling at each crack of gunfire. Still, through the terror, Mary's eyes lifted. She saw him move, not like a rancher, not like a man, but like a ghost that belonged to the storm itself. The shooting thinned. Smoke drifted across the yard, carrying the bitter smell of powder and blood. From the haze came a voice, low and cruel. "Archer." The men fell quiet at the name. Dust cleared enough to show a figure riding forward slow, steady. A scar cut across his jaw, eyes burning mean beneath the brim of his hat. His horse pawed at the earth, restless under the weight of its rider. Cole stood in the open, revolver smoking in his hand. His gaze lifted, steady as stone. The scar man spat, voice sharp. "Didn't reckon I'd ever see your ghost again. Should have finished you when I finished the rest." Mary's breath caught, her small hands clutching the boards of the porch. She understood then. This man wasn't just another outlaw. He was the one who had left Cole's world in ashes. Cole's jaw tightened, silence thick around him. The revolver in his hand gleamed with the promise of reckoning. The outlaw leader slid from his saddle, boots hitting dirt. He stepped forward, gun belt heavy at his hip. His men held back, waiting. The air grew still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The scarred man sneered. "You can't keep what ain't yours, Archer. Them girls'll end same as yours. Dead in the dirt." The words cut, sharp as knives. Cole's silence broke at last, his voice raw with gravel, deep as the mesa's stone. "You should have taken me instead." The moment froze. A hawk screamed overhead. The world narrowed to two men standing in the dust. Hands hovered above holsters. Fingers twitched. Then thunder. Two shots cracked as one. The girls flinched, burying their faces into each other's shoulders. When they looked again, the scarred man was down, hat rolled from his head, blood pooling dark into the sand. Cole stood tall, smoke rising from the barrel of his revolver. His face was carved with sorrow, but his eyes burned with something fierce and unbroken. The rest of the outlaws shifted, some reaching for rifles, some backing their horses. But none dared move closer. Cole's silence wrapped around them like a noose. One by one, they turned, spurring their mounts, dust rising in wild clouds as they fled into the canyons. The yard went still but for the crackle of flames. The barn smoldered, fence posts leaned broken, smoke rolling over the land. Mary and Clara crawled from under the porch. Their small feet stumbled across the yard, ash clinging to their hems. They stopped before him, eyes wide, chests heaving. Cole looked down at them, the revolver still in his hand. Slowly, he lowered it, sliding it back into the worn leather holster. His silence returned, heavy, but it no longer carried only sorrow. It carried promise. Clara's small hand slipped into his. Mary's gaze lifted, steady, searching his face. She whispered, voice hoarse, "You didn't just save us." He said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. By midday, townsfolk rode from Ash Creek, drawn by the thunder that had carried across the mesas. They found a ranch scarred but standing, smoke curling from the ruins of the barn, blood marking the dirt. And there, Cole Archer, tall against the wreckage, two children close at his side. Whispers carried quick among them. Some crossed themselves. Some spoke his name like a curse. Others like a prayer. The ghost of Black Mesa had risen again. The storyteller's voice draws low, rough as boots on gravel. And they say when the smoke cleared, silence spoke louder than any bullet fired that day. The ghost did not ride for vengeance alone, but for the living that clung to him. He took in two children when the desert might have claimed them. He took back his soul from the grave he'd buried it in. And still, when the wind cuts across Black Mesa at sundown, Folks swear they hear the echo of hooves, and the silence that follows, the silence that saved.